Greenlight Network presents Football Time.
Hey, and welcome to the Football Time Show. We're here for Week 18 of the football season. We got a little bit of health and safety protocols with Achilles rain this week, and those health and safety protocols are for you, not necessarily us, because I don't want you to see what he looks like on camera right now. So hopefully Achilles rain healing up will be back with us during the week to do our playoff preview and then our playoff pick show. So we're riding solo today on the Week 18. We'll change up the show a little bit. We aren't going to have our mutuals. I'm just going to go through the games. I'll preview the games. I'll give you a pick on the game. And then at the end of the show, we'll give our best bets on the game. So should be an interesting show. We'll get Achilles rain out of health and safety protocols next week and be back and ready to go for a big playoff preview. All right, let's start things out with Saturday. 2 games on Saturday that gave the illusion of meaningful games, but they weren't all that meaningful of football games. First, the Denver Broncos went to the Kansas City Chiefs. Not a lot on the line here. The Chiefs needed to win it to maintain the number 2 spot. They didn't play all that well, but they did end up getting the win in this one thanks to a fumble, scoop and score, really. Offense still didn't look great, but, Tyreek Hill was in and out of the lineup. They didn't look to be playing all that hard and going through the motions a little bit. The only thing that would concern me with the Chiefs going into the playoffs here is just that defense. It's starting to look a little weak. The Broncos look like they could take advantage of it a little bit, which is probably a little bit more concerning than last week's game versus Cincinnati Bengals, who were taking advantage of it. A lot more firepower there. But nonetheless, I think the Chiefs going into the playoffs right now are probably the AFC favorite. If I had to pick a team coming out of the AFC, I'd probably lean towards the Kansas City Chiefs. That's just because right now I can't see any other team in the AFC really putting anything together right now. Now, I don't know if I put my money right now on Kansas City. I really can't decide. A part of me wants to take Buffalo, but I don't like Buffalo in bad weather games right now. They just offense seems to not be able to find its form so much, and I can't totally trust Tennessee. Do you trust Cincinnati? Not really. Do you trust the Chargers? In theory, if they even make it, they might not even make it. And I don't think you could drop down and trust the Raiders. The Colts, that's how much do you want to trust Carson Wentz? So with that, you go with the tried and true. I think the Chiefs are the favorite out in the AFC. We can move on to the NFC game. Dallas, Philadelphia, both these games, pretty much both teams had everything wrapped up. Dallas could maneuver a little bit of seeding. Philadelphia could have maneuvered a little bit of seeding. But basically, this was a football game played to get each other's numbers and milestones and records. I don't quite know how you keep records when records are set on 14-game seasons, records are set on 16-game seasons, and now records are set on 17-game seasons. How that works out, I don't know. It seems like probably new records should start. So anything here was 17-game season. Dak owns a 17-game season touchdown pass record. What that means, I don't know, especially since we're probably jumping to about a 18-game season here in another couple year or two. Overall, Dallas really kept their starters in a little bit longer than I thought. They put up some nice numbers offensively. Maybe they needed that confidence going in. I don't know how much that works out because you saw it 2 weeks ago. They beat up on the Washington football team, stepped up a level in competition to the Arizona Cardinals. Offense looked pretty flat again. Once again, steps down in competition to the Philadelphia Eagles. Granted, it's a much better team than the Washington football team, but they put it on them. Can this Dallas team do this when they have to step up versus a Rams or a Packers or a Tampa Bay. I don't know, even within Arizona, if they can do it from what we saw last week, but it should be pretty interesting. They're still alive for a couple, maybe a 2 seed, depending on what goes down today. Overall, Philadelphia, I just don't think this team is capable of beating really, really elite level teams. I think that we've seen that all season long. They are capable of really beating up on the bad teams, so really, only if the Saints get in there, which they will not be playing, I think really could Philadelphia win a game. I think they're just going to be, roadkill here coming up for one of these top teams in the league, especially with what I saw last night. It just doesn't look like they can match up for those really, really top tier teams. So not much to take away from yesterday's game, and not a lot of games to take things from here today. We'll go through, we'll make picks, but honestly, if you're picking a lot of these games, you probably need to call the gambling hotline here, because this just is not a week to really gamble, because you don't know what you're getting. This is basically a week so players can get their numbers, their milestones, their contract incentives, and not much more. There are a couple big meaningful games. If you like those and want to bet on those, I would suggest those are the games you sort of look at, study, and make a play there. But overall, it just would be really, really hard to make a bet on a lot of these games. And we'll start out with the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland Browns are 5.5-point favorites here. Over-under sits at 37.5. First half total sits at 3 for the Browns and 18.5 on the first half total. And this is what I mean. Bengals have already said they're sitting pretty much everyone. Cleveland's already shut down Baker Mayfield. I'm sure they're going to shut down a lot of their other guys. Chubb might play a little bit, but I don't know how much. I don't know how much you want to use Chubb and risk him getting hurt going into next season. So what is this line, 5.5? How much are either of these teams going to be invested? We already know the Bengals have waved the red flag and said they aren't going to be invested, but why is Cleveland going to be invested? They have no playoff hopes here, and I think really looking at this game, it's more like the Bengals, who have a first shot at the playoffs in a long, long time to try to make a run here. Would have more to play for in this game, even if you're getting the backups. You're getting, some solid backups. They have good receiver depth. SimGP Ryan at running back, a really good receiver depth. I've always been a big Brandon Allen fan out of Western Kentucky. Granted, he's not Joe Burrow, but I think he's a pretty solid backup quarterback. You're getting Case Keenum for the Cleveland Browns side, which is probably, a nice Brandon Allen comp for backup quarterback-wise, passing in the night. So there's not a lot of difference here. I would probably lean taking the 5.5 in this game, but honestly, I think this is overall just a cross out, and I wouldn't be playing this game really much at all. It just seems like Cleveland doesn't have much to play for, so why would you lean on that sort of side of things, especially as a favorite? And the Bengals have already said, we aren't taking this game seriously. We're resting our guys. We're getting ready for a playoff run. So, 5.5 was where I'd lean and take on the Cincinnati Bengals, but really, this is an automatic cross-off and definitely an automatic no bet for me. Moving on to the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions. Green Bay minus 3.5. 45 on the over-under total on this one. 3.5 on the first half total. 21.5 on the first half over-under total. And you're seeing this in both games here, really. The first half line is the same as the game line. And Green Bay, I think, is going to play their starters a little bit in this one. So if you're going to play a Green Bay, the first half minus 3.5 would be the play here. But honestly, I don't think I'd touch this as really either. How much are the Lions going to be playing? I think the Lions might make a push here, a little bit here. They've shown Dan Campbell they haven't folded. Now they're in a tricky spot because losses do matter to them, so it might behoove them draft-wise to get a loss. But overall, I think your play is probably Green Bay first half, because you might get a first half of Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, maybe a handful of the receivers. But once again, this is a game I totally wouldn't touch. I certainly wouldn't touch the full game spread unless you're going to reverse and go Lions here at plus 3.5, because I think they're going to play hard throughout. They've shown that under Dan Campbell. No matter what the situation, they usually step up and try to make a game of things. Jared Goff will be back playing in this one. DeAndre Swift got a second week in, pads this week, so maybe he'll have a little bit more of an impact in this game. So maybe you go first half Green Bay game, 3.5 Lions on this one, and split the difference. See if you can middle it and really have a nice little home. But once again, this is another game where I just, I pull back and automatically cross off because it has no meaning, especially with Green Bay already have gotten the bye throughout the playoffs. This is not that kind of game. We talked about it in our preview show with Achilles about how much do you use the Green Bay starters, because I don't think you want 2 weeks off with your guys. So I do think you might get a first half with Green Bay. So the play might be Green Bay first half, game Detroit Lions. See if you can sort of middle that thing there and be safe on both, or disturb yourself and lose both the first half and the game lines overall. But yeah, this is just another cross-off for me. And then on the mega cross-off side, Chicago Bears, Minnesota Vikings in this one. Minnesota Vikings are 3.5-point favorites. Not quite sure how they come to conclusion on that line, but hey, whatever. Maybe Cook's got to get some numbers, but if anybody's won meaningless games more than any team this season, it's probably the Chicago Bears. So the plus 3.5 number for me looks a little bit better on the Bears side. They've actually been pretty good when Dalton and Folds have started, if you look at their records overall, and I think this Vikings team is just ready for a house cleaning. The Bears seem to be ready for a house cleaning too. I don't know if we're going to get that. We might get the coach. Maybe we don't get the coach if Jim Harbaugh doesn't agree to come over. So, we've already read reports about Ryan Pace not going to be probably relieved of his duties as GM. So, this Bears thing might be a play today and see how they play today. There's no way I touch the Vikings because everybody knows that house cleaning is coming. Probably 2 minutes after the game, that house cleaning is coming. The Bears, I think, is a little bit more up in the air. I'm hoping the house cleaning is coming. I think I've been hoping for about 2 years this house cleaning has come. But we'll see how the Bears go. But that plus 3.5 for me, if you're going to bet on this game, once again, I would not bet on this game. I just don't think you could trust either side here. How much are either side going to play? I just would be a total stay away on Chicago Bears, Minnesota Vikings. But you might lean into it a little bit here because the Bears have just been the better team at sort of winning meaningless games. Sort of, even so, towards the end of the year here, I believe they won 2 straight here to close out the season. None of them have mattered. So you might want to ride that train, getting 3.5 points. You might even want to throw a little on the money line there at plus 150. So 3.5 for the Bears. I think I'd like. First half line sits at 3. First half total sits at 21.5. I don't think I'd make a move there. I might watch the game a little bit and see what goes on and how things are playing out and see what the second half line might be and see if somebody really wants to make a push to win this. I don't know what the Vikings push will be to win this. I just, watching these two teams close out the season, I think the Bears push a little bit harder in this one if I'm trying to guess in this one. But this is another automatic cross-off for me here. Next up, Washington football team versus the New York Giants. Washington football team 6.5-point favorites on this one, 37 points on the total, 3.5 on the first half line, 19.5 on the first half total. I don't think there's any way to go but to take the Washington football team, especially with Jake Fromm taking the quarterback. Last time we saw him a couple of weeks ago, the brilliant coach in Joe Judge put him in there, then pulled him out. I don't think they could do much worse than last week, but I don't know how much better it's getting from last week. This Washington football team has shown a little bit of life. They played really hard last week versus Philadelphia. Should have gotten that win, but Philadelphia made enough plays down the stretch to sort of sneak it out. The question is, do you want to take that 6.5 number? I don't want anything to do with the Giants. I don't care if this number is probably 20. If you've watched anything that the Giants football team has done towards the end of the season, this would not be anything I'd want anything to do with. The question is, do you trust yourself on the Washington football team at 6.5? Do they close out this season well? I don't know. I don't think I could grab that 6.5 just because I don't know if this offense is capable of doing that. I know we're getting nothing from the Giants, but I don't know if we're not going to get nothing from the Washington football team and we just get some slog of a 13-7 game, 10-7 game, 10-6 game, hell, maybe even a 6-3 game. Just a bad football game is what this is going to be. So on a bad football game, do you want the 6.5 number? I don't think you want to go that far. Maybe you look at that first half and 3.5, and this Washington football team jumps out and grabs it by the throat and takes this game, and you have that 3.5 number. And then if you want to push forward in an in-game line, maybe you do that. But I just would not trust the 6.5 on this, even though we're getting bad from the New York Giants here. But it's just no way to really take 6.5 on this Washington football team and trust that. So that's another game that's probably a cross-off. Also another game that has no point or meaning. Both teams are out of the playoffs. Both teams, will sort of sit middle to low pack in the draft order. Because the Giants somehow won 4 games on the football season. Don't know how that quite happened, especially with the way they've closed out the football season, but it certainly happened. So if I was making a pick, Washington football team minus 3.5 first half. I don't know if I'd grab that line on this. Minus 3.5 Washington football team on the first half line. We'll move to a game that has some meaning here. It means something definitely for the Indianapolis Colts. They go to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, the stat has been floating around that they have not won in Jacksonville since 2014. Do I think that's meaningful? No, not all that much. Mostly none of these players were around in 2014, and the Colts have not always been all that good since 2014. There was a nice little stretch there where they were a pretty mediocre team, just like the Jacksonville Jaguars. So mediocre versus mediocre, home field usually wins out. That hasn't been the case so far this year all that much, but it has been the case. Indianapolis Colts 14.5 here. Can you dive on that line? As bad as Jacksonville is, that's still a lot of points in this game. A lot of pressure on the Indianapolis Colts. They have to win this game to get into the playoffs. Really blew it last week in that home game versus Oakland. Carson Wentz did not look good. Maybe he could come back and look better. I just don't know how to really bet this game. That 14.5 number is much, much too high. They just don't want you really being able to tease this game. They don't want you to be able to take the money line on this game. Can you take the over-under at 43.5? I mean, if you watched last week, that over-under hit just by the Patriots on its own. So do you lean over on that because the Colts might be able to score 43 points? I don't know if you could do that if you watch the Indianapolis Colts play offense. And then Jacksonville's certainly not going to give you anything on offense. We've seen that for the last 10 weeks now. Granted, Trevor Lawrence did finally throw a touchdown pass last week, but I don't think you could go there, and it's very hard to talk yourself into the under at 43.5 just because Jacksonville's so bad, and they could give up 43.5 points on their own to the Indianapolis Colts. So really hard to differentiate there between the over and under. On the first half line, 9.5 for the Indianapolis Colts. Do they come out with a blazing start, or do they come out a little bit soft and nervous because this is such a big game for them? 22.5 on the first half total. That's a pretty high first half total. It's the highest we've had so far on this slate. I just don't know which way to go here. I can't take Jacksonville in the 14.5, though. That's probably where I'd ride. I think the 14.5 is too many points for the Colts. Making a pick on this game, I'm going 14.5 on the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think what you might have to do in this one is start playing a little bit with the line and maybe trying to parlay it up with a couple other ones that you think are automatics and seeing if you could build yourself into at least some sort of nice parlay with an adjusted line for yourself. That's the only way I can see a play here, unless you're going to go Jacksonville Jaguars 14.5. And I don't know even if Jacksonville fans can talk themselves into that with the way they've played. So a bet on the game on this line, I'm going Jacksonville Jaguars 14.5. I would not touch that at all. The thing I'd probably do is just try to work around, play around with this and a couple other games, adjust the line, see what sort of value you could get in a sort of three-team parlay. I wouldn't go much over three teams. Maybe you can squeeze a fourth in there, but you're starting to get into murky territory. I doubt you could do much adjusting and put it in a two-game parlay with another one and get great value. But you could probably find a three, start adjusting some lines on some games that have a little bit more meaning, and maybe get some decent value there with the Indianapolis Colts. But I'd probably have to put it somewhere under the 6.5 number, maybe even less than that, because I just don't know if I could trust the Colts here right now in this one. All right, let's move on to the next game. It looked like it was going to be a good game to close out the season, but it turns out to be kind of meaningless. There is a way for these two teams to get in the playoffs. A lot's got to happen. I don't think those are going to happen. But you got the Pittsburgh Steelers. You got the Baltimore Ravens. You got the Ravens as 3-point favorites in this one. 41.5 on the total. 3 on the first half line. 20.5 on the over-under. I think you got to just sort of read how this game's going to play out, because I think it'll be difficult. I do think these two teams are going to go for it, because I don't think either team wants to lose to the other. Yes, the playoff hopes are pretty much gone, but I do think both teams will go after this game. But what are you getting from the Steelers after the emotional game on Monday night, going out with a win at Heinz Field for Ben Roethlisberger? Granted, you saw some Najee Harris. Finally, Najee Harris seemed to break out there for a big performance. Do you get that again? Baltimore, where are their heads out? They almost stole that Rams game. It seemed like that pretty much just put the nail in the coffin in their season. What are you going to get out of these guys? Can Harbaugh get one more response out of them and get the cover? I don't know. I lean Steelers here on the +3. The problem with that is asking that offense to come back once again and make some, plays here. If you looked at the numbers in those games, Ben Roethlisberger threw for 124 yards on 47 attempts. That's ick. And I don't know if you're going to get that same 188 yards from Najee Harris on this Baltimore team. So where does that offense leave it? 41.5 on the total seems a little bit high. That's probably where I'd lean here. I'd lean under on the 41 here in this game. The problem with that is you reverse it here, and neither of these teams have anything to play for all that much. So how much number padding are we going to get for offensive members here? And really, Baltimore has been more of an offensive team this season. So I think if I'm making a pick on this game, I'm going under the 41. If I'm making a play on the actual game, I think I take Steelers +3, but I don't like this game one bit at all. It should be interesting to see how these teams play, how hard they play in this game, even with pretty much their playoff hopes of both teams dashed, and really, the Ravens season ruined, just with the injuries piling up, just a season basically from hell for them. Hopefully next year they could come back and be a contender in this one. Pittsburgh have just worked their way into another 500 season with really, really a bad team. With Ben going away, hopefully it's now time to retool. The defense was not as good as I think we thought going in, but it still has enough life in it to shut some teams down. They might need to retool a little bit there, but it should be interesting to see how Pittsburgh goes about that retooling. Do they bring in a young quarterback? Do they find one of these veterans that may be on the market? Who knows? But should be interesting to see how this game plays out at, even though both teams closing out the season, not much playoff hopes. Once again, we move to a game with some meaning. How much meaning? I don't know. I certainly know the Tennessee Titans want the 1 seed. Tennessee Titans at the Houston Texans, 10.5-point line. This has dropped a little bit. I think because the Texans seem to give the Tennessee Titans trouble. We talked about the Jacksonville Jaguars giving the Colts trouble. I think the Texans give the Titans a little bit of trouble here. So this line's dropped a little bit. How aggressive will Tennessee be in this game? That they're in the playoffs. I know they really want that 1 seed and everything to come through Nashville. But is it at the detriment of getting people hurt in this game? No Derrick Henry. We'll see how that goes. This offense has struggled up until the point of last week. They looked a little bit better versus the Miami Dolphins, but a lot of that was the Miami Dolphins offense. The Texans, how seriously are they going to take this game? They're hovering right around that draft line where a win might drop them, a handful of picks down the draft board on a team that's totally retooling. But the offense has been a little bit perky here with Davis Mills to close out the season. Last week was not quite indicative of that, but, another good Rex Burkhead performance might be coming out of this one. We'll see where this one goes. 10.5 on the line then this week, 42.5 on the total, 6.5 on the first half line, 21.5 on the first half total. I think if you're taking Tennessee, you take Tennessee thinking they're going to come out and try to put this one away early, so you might ride that first half line of minus, 6.5. I think if you're playing the long game here, you take Tennessee or you take Houston plus a 10.5. And I think I'd ride with that 10.5 on Houston. I just think they have a little bit of Tennessee's number. I think Tennessee wins this game. This might be one of the ones where you sort of play on the adjusted line and maybe put it up there with the Indianapolis Colts. See if you could get this down to maybe about 3. See if you could get the Colts maybe down to about 6. See where that plays out, parlay-wise for you, and see how that works out in there when you add in another team. But I think I'm playing the Texans here plus the 10.5, just because I think they give them a little trouble. But I think the best play would be Tennessee minus the 6.5 for the first half. So maybe you square off 6.5 first half for Tennessee, jump out in front of the Texans. Then as Tennessee feels they got the game in hand, they switch, pull back a little bit, the throttle, the Houston Texans close out the game pretty strongly, cover that 10.5. So you might be able to middle that one as well. 2 games where I gave you one where you might be able to middle it. See if you can hit that middle and double your pleasure, double your fun for those games. So I think the best play on this game is the 6.5 for the Tennessee Titans. But I think you could maybe sneak in there and get a 6.5 first half Tennessee Titans, 10.5 Houston Texans for the game. Next up, interesting game out of Atlanta. Probably no Kyle Pitts here. New Orleans goes there with playoff hopes, and I think legit playoff hopes here. This one's gone up 1.5 since the beginning of the week. People are putting money on the Saints. I don't know if I'd go that far to put money on the Saints at 4.5 is the number. Total at 40, first half line at 2.5, first half total at 20. I would say this. I don't know how much effort the Falcons are going to give, but judging from last week, they were pretty frisky up in Buffalo there. Buffalo needed that whole game to close them out, and they had every reason to pack it in. It was cold, it was snowy, and yet they still fought on. So I think the Falcons are going to come out here with a little bit of life in this game, so I'd be scared to take that high number of 4.5, especially with how much trouble the Saints have had scoring. Now, that being said, I think if the Saints get up on them, it might be pack it in time for the Falcons. The Saints have to win this game to keep their playoff hopes alive. And if you look across the board where San Francisco is going to Los Angeles, they very much have a chance. Because if the Rams beat San Francisco and the Saints win, the Saints are in. So the Saints have everything to play for in this game. Atlanta, not so much. They have 7 wins on the season, which is about 4 more than I think they probably deserved on the season. So they played a little bit better than I think what they've looked like as a team overall. But do you take the 4.5? I don't know. That just seems like a little bit of too much of a leap point spread-wise for this Saints team that just really, really struggles scoring here. I think this is one you look at in game. Maybe if you see it, second half and it's a little bit close, but the Saints are up ahead, you take the Saints as they might pull away and get an extra score or two as the Falcons begin to pack it out and wind down their season. But I just can't take that 4.5. First half, 2.5. That's just too much because I think the Saints, if anybody's going to come out hot, it's probably going to be the Saints. But once again, I want no part of the Saints offense. I don't want any part of the Falcons. I think the best number to probably go with here is the 40 on the over-under total. I'd lean under here a little bit. Every Saints game pretty much going under, especially ones in the 40. So I think you could probably get a 20-13 game maybe played here, and that's 33, and we're getting the way under. So Saints-Falcons, the play on this game, I go 40 under. Next up, Jets-Bills, 16.5 for the Bills. Everything to play for the Bills, wise. They're already in the playoffs, but they can win the division. They probably can creep up to a 3 seed here. How much does that matter to them? I don't know. But I remember last year, they played Miami to close out that season. Had nothing really to play for in that game. They were locked into the 2, and they ended up scoring about 60 points in that one. The Jets have closed the season really, really well. Does that momentum continue, or does it sort of shut down here this last game of the season? And how do we look at them going into next season? I really liked the way they have looked to close out this season. So they might be able to push the Bills a little bit in this one, much like Atlanta did. But Buffalo ends up probably pulling it out. I don't know how much they want to play Josh Allen. I don't know how much they want to play Stephon Diggs. So you got to factor that in just a little bit. So you take the 16.5. I don't know. I think you got a double play in this one as well. 41.5 on the total, 9.5 on the first half line. 21 on the total. Maybe you go first half Bills. Maybe you go game 16.5 Jets. The only thing about that I'd be a little leery of is the Bills, once they've seemed to get rolling, they tend to run up the score. So this one I would not be as bullish about on taking a game in-game line. I do think the Bills probably try to win this game. I'm a little worried about how much motivation the Jets have. So my play on this one would probably be 9.5 first half total, but I don't think that's a very good bet. So really, I'm axing this game off, and I don't think I'd do anything. If I was picking for this game, I'd go 9.5 first half and just see if you could ride the Bills coming up, trying to put this game away early, and maybe playing that the Jets are ready to shut it down for the season and come back next year and see what we could get. I will say there's some promising stuff coming out of the Jets. They got a lot of draft picks coming into the season, so maybe an early season preview of next year. New York Jets as our sleeper. That division is getting a little bit interesting here with the Patriots' improvement this year. The Dolphins continued success to mediocrity, I guess you'd say, but I thought it, as they close the season, it's been pretty successful for the Dolphins. And the Jets looking with a little bit of spunk, and you still got the Buffalo Bills sitting there. So that division's getting inch by inch a little bit better. But on a play here, if I had to take something, 9.5 first half for the Buffalo Bills. Next up, we're going to New England, goes to Miami. Miami's 5.5-point dogs here. I think this number is a little bit too big, especially with how the Patriots have struggled versus the Dolphins. Not a ton to play for the Patriots. It'll be interesting to see how the Patriots take this game here. I'm sure they want to win it because there's still an off chance that they can get into the division here. But I think the Dolphins are going to want to win it. I think Brian Flores is going to want to close this season out on a 9-8 record. I think that would mean a lot to him. That's just a one-game difference from last year. I think they'd love to sweep the Patriots, and I think it's important to sort of see how Tua plays in this game. He looked really bad last week versus Tennessee, just to see where you are quarterback-wise. Do you need to start thinking about maybe bringing in a different quarterback this offseason? I don't know if it's quite that time yet, but they have to advance this offense a little bit. It's been pretty mundane and pedestrian. I will say Tua has looked much better in the second half of the season. Yes, it's not flashy or pretty, but you sort of got to give this a little bit of this is Tua's rookie season. Last year was a little bit of watch coming off that hip surgery, being in and out, and with all the COVID stuff. I look at this more as Tua's real rookie season here, and I think there's been progress made. Now, next season, I think, is the real sort of judge and jury. Can this offense turn into an explosive offense? And can it not just be, let's try to get the ball in Jalen Waddle's hands as much as we can? Can the offensive line improve? So 5.5, this is one of the ones I think there's value here in the Miami Dolphins getting 5.5 at home in this game. I just think it's a couple too many points for the New England Patriots team that has commonly struggled versus the Miami Dolphins, no matter where these teams' records are at. So 5.5 for the Miami Dolphins would be my play in this game. Next up, we go Carolina, Tampa Bay Bucks. Tampa Bay Bucks minus 9.5. Favorites in this one, 42.5 on the total, 5 on the first half line, and 21 on the total here. Not ton to play for in this game. How much of the Bucks going to go? I don't know. I assume they might play their guys a little bit, but I'd be very nervous because they've been the ones that have had the injury bug to close out this season, and you certainly don't want anything going wrong in this game, in a meaningless game versus Carolina. That being said, Carolina has been brutal all season long. Do you take that first half line and think Tampa Bay gets out in front? I don't know if I do that here, especially with the way Tampa Bay looked last week. They seem to start slow. Do you grab that 9.5? I don't know. I think actually the play, sadly, and sort of as I regurgitate a little bit back in my mouth, is the Carolina Panthers at 9.5 on this one. Yeah, Sam Darnold looks bad. Yeah, that running game looks bad. But I don't like Tampa Bay's motivation in this one. I think this will be much similar to how the game was played versus the New York Jets. So I think there's value there in the 9.5 points. They've already said Matt Rule is coming back. So they aren't really cleaning house. They're cleaning coordinator house. You've heard Jay Gruden. You've heard Bill O'Brien. Eyes roll over a little bit there. Not really all that inventive game-changing offensive coordinator thoughts there. But really the question for Carolina going into next offseason, if they can find a productive starting NFL-level quarterback. But I just don't know Tampa Bay's motivation here. If you can figure out Tampa Bay's motivation in this game, if it's light, grab Carolina. If they're coming to play, you grab Tampa Bay because they'll cover that number pretty easy. But I don't think Tampa Bay's motivation in this game will be very high. So I think that 9.5 number is a pretty nice bloated number on those side of things. Next up, one of the few games that has a ton of meaning here, San Francisco, Los Angeles. The Rams need it to win this division. San Francisco needs it to get in the playoffs. San Francisco has really owned the Los Angeles Rams the last couple seasons. So I think the Rams want this one. I think the Rams want this one to make a stamp on the season. I will say, future-wise, I'm keeping my eyes on the Rams here as maybe my team out of the NFC to make it to the Super Bowl. I'm looking at future plays here. I want to see how they play this game. I want them to come into this game and just hammer the 49ers. 49ers cornerbacks have all been in health and safety protocols. Their cornerbacks are bad anyway, so either we're getting backup cornerbacks to the bad cornerbacks, or we're getting cornerbacks who haven't practiced all week, aren't healthy, and aren't very good. I want the Rams to take this game and crush the 49ers in this one, put their stamp on the season, and be ready to make a run here in the playoffs, challenge the Green Bay Packers. Because right now, I don't know who's the team that's challenging the Green Bay Packers out of the NFC. I could throw a lot of teams out in the AFC, but right now, NFC-wise, with the way Tampa Bay's looked, with the way the Cowboys seem to be very, very hot and cold, with the way Arizona's closing the season, it's this Rams team I think are bust that isn't Green Bay. So can the Rams put their stamp on it? Can they do an offensive game versus San Francisco 49ers who have given them fits? And can they pull this out and win it and have a little bit of momentum going into these playoffs here. So I think it's really, really important for the Rams to win this one. I think they think it's important for them to win this one. So I think that -3.5 versus San Francisco 49ers. Of games I'm betting on this week, this is one of the ones I'm really going after, and that's the Rams -3.5. I don't know if you could do that first half total at -2.5 because the 49ers seem to kick in on games, and the Rams have been so slow to start the season. So I don't know if there's great value there. I think the better value is the 3.5 game number here. So I'm grabbing the Rams -3.5. I'm really looking at this one game-wise and for my futures. We'll get into that on our preview show and our recap show on Tuesday and see if we can find some playoff futures. But I'm certainly looking at the Rams. I need to at least see one good Stafford game to close out this season versus a legitimate team. And it's going to be really interesting how this game plays out. Who plays quarterback for the Rams? Is it Trey Lance? Is it Jimmy Garoppolo? A lot of reports coming out that Jimmy was having trouble gripping the ball in practice. How much of that do you believe? I don't know. But it should be ripe for the Rams to take this and finally beat the San Francisco 49ers team here. So one of the actual plays I'm making in Week 18 of the NFL season is the Los Angeles Rams -3.5. All right, let's move to Seattle and Arizona. Little bit of a tricky game here because Arizona theoretically can still win the AFC or NFC West. But I think it's important for their guys, especially like Kyler Murray and stuff, to get healthy and get ready for the playoffs. So I don't know what their motivation is. Seattle last week still looked a little bit motivated to play. If those guys are going to go, Wilson, Lockett, Metcalf, Penny, all those guys are going to go. The defense has been pretty solid to close out the season. I think this could be a little bit more of a game. And I don't know how much it means to Arizona. They might scoreboard watch and play this game, and if the Rams get out in front, that's when they start to pull back a little bit. But I think there's value here also in Seattle plus a 5.5. I don't think the Seattle team will pack it in. They haven't particularly been a very good football team this season, but in a division game, getting 5.5 points, I think they'll go after here this Cardinals team who hasn't really looked good. I wasn't overly impressed even with that win versus Dallas. I will say their defense started to look a little bit more like it had in the early to mid-season here, but overall I think this will be a pretty tight game. Arizona might pull it out, but I think that 5.5 number is a pretty good number to take here in the Seattle game, especially if we start to see the Cardinals guys getting out of there and prepping for the playoffs, because yes, they can win the NFC West, but once again, that's a seeding thing. That's a sort of fake title thing. That's not going to help you get a bye. That's not going to help you get anything. It's just a matchup wise, and it's too hard to even get matchup wise here because you don't know how the other teams are going to do and really where you fall. So you can't even really play that game. So I'd be really, really nervous if I'm taking the Cardinals at 5.5 here. That Kyler, sort of gets pulled pretty quickly. And from what I saw last week with Seattle, it didn't look like they wanted to pull their guys all that much. They wanted to close out the season probably on a high note. So I'd look at the 5.5 on the Seattle Seahawks on this one. All right, the last game of the day, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Las Vegas Raiders. Really the only true game that both sides have something to play for. Win and you're in the playoffs here. Game littered with history here. Chargers, Raiders, through the 70s, through the 80s of these two teams' existence. It has been a pretty big AFC matchup, and the Raiders have come out on top for the majority of the time when these games really matter. Go check out a couple of those AFC Championship games where these Chargers and Raiders teams played each other. This is a pretty big game in history, Chargers-Raiders, certainly in the 70s and 80s. Not so much in the 90s. There were little spots here with the Chargers and Raiders. Both were good in the 90s and 00s. Never seemed to coincide at the same time. So this is it's a fun nostalgia one here. If you're a big fan of these two teams and them playing each other in the 70s and 80s. And the Raiders always seem to come out on top. So we got another chapter in this saga here of Chargers, Raiders. How is it going to go? Who's going to come out and who's going to be in the playoffs here? 3-point spread for the Los Angeles Chargers here, 49 on the total, 2.5 on the first half number, 24.5 on the first half over under total. Chargers better team. I think we know that. Everybody looks to be healthy with Jarwin James and Bosa back on defense, which is really, really important for their defense. Eckler, Williams, Allen, all in there to play football games. So, are we taking the Chargers 3? I'm not. I'm taking this Las Vegas Raiders team. Yes, it's been a little smoke and mirrors. Yes, it's been, light to say the least. It's not impressive wins, but they are wins. And I just loved the heart of this team. And I think the Raiders continue this history here of dominating the Chargers in big, important games that matter. I think this is a big, important games that matter. I think David Carr comes out, plays a great game this season. Looks like Waller's going to be in there. So you got Renfro, you got Waller, you got a little bit better offense. Jacobs has been really, really good to close out the season. You got John Madden's widow opening up the game here. So you got a little bit of historic mystique coming into this game from those old school clashes of the Chargers and Raiders. This is going to be really a fun game. Can the Chargers hold on? They are the better team, but I'm leaning Raiders here. This is another one of my big bets on the day. I'm going Raiders. I'm playing this Raiders team. Comes out, plays with the heart that they played with all season long, and gets the victory here. But to protect yourself, take that +3. Don't take the money line. If you've ever watched the Chargers and their kicking game throughout the season, I think you're pretty safe taking that 3 points here nonetheless. But of the games, this one should be the most entertaining. Should be a really fun watch and see who wins to get in on the Sunday night game, Chargers, Raiders, +3. All right, those are our games. I gave you my thoughts and picks on all of them, but my best bets of the week. We're going to start out with the Los Angeles Rams -3.5. We're going to go Las Vegas Raiders +3, and we're going to go Seattle Seahawks +5.5. And if I'm sprinkling a little on a game that doesn't mean anything, I'm going with the Chicago Bears in this one as well. So Chicago Bears money line +150. Pretty good value there. Chicago Bears, I think also you could take spread. And a couple of those middles I might try out. I don't know if I'd be real aggressive in them, but I might try out. But the big 3 I'm going with, certainly the big 2, Raiders +3, Rams -3.5, and then I take a little bit on that Seahawks +5.5. Might sprinkle a little money line parlay on Seahawks and the Chicago Bears and see what you get there. Might want to extend it to 3 team money line parlay in Bears, Raiders, and Seahawks and see what you get there as well. So some good value there. All right, that's our show. Be sure to watch us next week. The Dynamite's probably going to be back. We might do a college football preview show, but more likely we're going to start to get into the college basketball season on the Know It All podcast. Bring in college basketball. The games are starting back up after a lot of health and safety protocol forfeitures and cancellations, but we'll get the Dynamite back in the fold here talking college basketball. Achilles Reign will be out of health and safety protocols, and we'll get into our big NFL playoff previews, our picks, our future bets, recaps of Week 18 season. You don't want to miss any of that stuff. That's our show, and we're out.